Okay, everyone, welcome to the webinar regarding the Master's in Psychology program at CUNY SPS. My name is Dr. Carla Marquez-Lewis, and I am the director of both the Master's program and the undergraduate program here at the CUNY School of Professional Studies. So thank you again for joining us this evening and taking time out of your schedule to hear a little bit more about our program. I want to take some time to go through a little bit about our school, just a brief synopsis for those of you who are not familiar with it. Then I'd like to go into the program itself, what the program is about, the curriculum, important things to know, and then we'll talk a little bit about career prospects, and then I'd like to end by opening it up for a Q&A session. You can go ahead and type in your questions. They'll pop up, I'll be able to see it, and then we'll be able to get you those answers that you're looking for. So let's go ahead and get started. And again, I should just mention that I really do encourage you to send in your questions. You're making a big decision about where to attend graduate school or whether to attend graduate school and if this is the right fit for you. And we want to be sure that you get all of the answers and the information that you need to make that decision. So if you have a question, the chances are someone else has that question too. So do yourself a favor and others a favor and feel free to just ask. So just a little bit about the CUNY School of Professional Studies. For those of you who are not aware, we are part of the larger consortium of CUNY, which includes both undergraduate programs, graduate programs, community colleges. It's a broad, large network. It's the largest public university system in the United States. Our particular school is housed as part of the CUNY Graduate School and University Center, which is located on 34th and 5th Avenue. It is the graduate degree wing of CUNY, mostly mostly PhD programs, but also master's programs. And they are just down the road from us. We are located on 31st Street between 6th Avenues and 7th Avenues, for those of you who are familiar with New York City. We started in 2003. We are accredited by Middle States Commission on Higher Education. And I raise that because it's very important that when you're deciding on a graduate program to attend, that you really look at accreditation. And you can always go to the school's website and they should have a link that'll say accreditation. Click on it and it'll tell you what kind of accreditation they have. And you can also learn a little bit more about that accrediting body. But you want to make sure that it has accreditation because, one, you're going to get a reputable school, and everyone wants that. You're going to get a quality education because Middle States requires that schools go through a very rigorous process to gain accreditation. And it's also going to carry a lot greater weight in terms of your degree. If you ever plan on going on to a PhD program, for example, they'll want to make sure that your credits from your prior graduate experience come from an accredited university. And I can tell you that there are just all too many times where we have people who find out, sadly, that they went to school for a long period of time and the school that they attended was not accredited, and they come across some trouble later, whether it's with trying to pursue a doctoral degree or sometimes even getting licensure in some other area. So just an FYI, check on accreditation. So Middle States Commission on Higher Education is the highest ranking accreditation body. So we're very proud of that. We are also registered with the New York State of Education Department, the Office of Professions that's specific to psychology and some other professions that are in that pool. But what that also does is it demonstrates that there's another sort of oversight body that's looking at this program and registering it, which tells you that this is a robust program, it's legitimate, and you're going to get a good quality education. So CUNY SPS and School of Professional Studies, we just refer to it as SPS, is home to 11 master's degrees, and I actually should fixed that number because we've added a couple of other master's degrees in nursing recently. We have 13 bachelor's degree programs, 17 certificate and advanced certificate programs, and we have well over 2,700 students who are currently enrolled in degree programs here. So it's a small school relative to some of the larger CUNY campuses, but it is a pretty large school. So most of our programs are online, but not all of them. We have face-to-face programs as well. The psychology program, though, is a fully online program. So we've had a bachelor's in psychology for quite some time. However, the master's in psychology program only launched a couple of years ago. So we have our first graduating class this spring, next semester. And, you know, we have a pretty large and robust population of students. Although the program has only been around for 4 semesters, we have well over 150 students enrolled in the program. So it is a big program. It's growing fairly rapidly, and we're very proud of that. We are the only fully online program of our kind at CUNY, and one of the things that we pride ourselves on is focusing on degree completion and working adults. So particularly for the bachelor's degree students, degree completion is a big deal. But even for our graduate programs where students come into the program and, you know, they're starting from scratch, you know, catering to working adults is something that really shows itself in pretty much everything that we do. So we try to keep the courses flexible. It doesn't mean that they're not rigorous. It doesn't mean that there aren't deadlines, because there absolutely are weekly deadlines. But we try to remember who our core population is. And most of those people are working full time, juggling responsibilities, you know, juggling children, jobs, whatever it happens to be. And so the online nature of CUNY SPS works for a lot of people. It's an affordable program. When all is said and done, the master's program will cost you about $15,000, which is actually very, very minimal compared to a lot of programs. And one of the things to do, and that I always suggest prospective students do when they're shopping around for programs, is to not just look at the cost of the program, but look at the credits. Because what sometimes happens is a program looks like it costs a certain amount per credit, but what you find out is that whereas maybe one program requires each class is 3 credits, another program it's 5 or 6 credits. So you're actually paying quite a bit more for that second program. So just keep that in mind when you look around. Make sure that you understand exactly not just how many credits are in the entire program, but how many credits each class. So our programs are taught by both academics and practitioners. So what we mean by that is it's not just people who are focused on theory and teaching content. It's also people who are out in the field and who are working and who are doing these things that we're trying to teach you on a daily basis. So if you're interested in the IO program, for example, you know, you'll be working with people who have PhDs in psychology, of course, but who are also working in the trenches, doing research, working for companies, consultants. They're actually IO psychologists in the field. Same with developmental psychology. So we want to make sure that you have the theory, you have a strong academic background, but you also have the skill set that you need to hit the ground running on day one when you go out into the workforce. So part-time students are welcome. This tends to be a pretty huge plus for many students, especially because, like I mentioned before, a lot of people are working and have a lot of responsibilities. So being able to attend part-time is something that students really want. Not all master's programs are like that. Some require people to attend full-time or require internships or things like that that make it impossible for some people to pursue a graduate degree. We ask that all of our students enroll in at least 1 class per semester, but as long as they're taking 1 class a semester and they're making progress, that's fine. And we just want you to find a schedule that works. And if 1 class a semester is all your schedule can allow, That's great. We welcome you, and we welcome your pace of learning and a pace of moving through the program. So our master's program, the degree is a master's in psychology, and then we have 2 tracks. So there is an industrial organizational psychology track, and there's a developmental psychology track. And for those of you who are not familiar with industrial organizational psychology, which is referred to as IO Psych, IO Psych is the study of human behavior in organizations and in the workplace. So I often give the example of Google. Google has been known to bring on IO psychologists to really think about productivity and motivation, organizational culture, things that you can do to retain your workforce. So all of those kinds of things about thinking about how humans function in organizations and in their places of employment are covered under that umbrella. And then we have the second track, developmental psychology, which is a very broad track. It's the study of human growth throughout the lifespan, and that ranges from infancy through adulthood. Most people will specialize in some kind of particular area. So for example, developmental psychologists might work primarily with infants or young children, toddlers. Some people might focus on adolescents. Other people might focus on geriatrics and end-of-life issues. But developmental psychology is focused on human growth, not just in terms of cognitive abilities, but also social growth, emotional growth, physical growth even, so growth in all kinds of stages. And so because of that, it makes it quite flexible, as you can imagine, because you're really looking at people, really across their entire lives. So in terms of who should apply for the program, I think of our students as falling into usually one of these 3 categories. So first are people in the field who need to acquire some kind of specific advanced knowledge. So people who want to obtain this educational credential, they're already doing whatever it is that they're doing. So I'll give you a pretty solid example. If it's someone in IO psychology, so they have a bachelor's degree in maybe psychology, maybe some other field. They've been working in HR, human resources for a while, maybe something like talent acquisition, right? Who do we hire to fulfill a position? But they can't move up where they are without having some kind of advanced credentials. And so students come pursuing this degree so that they can give themselves those credentials that they need to advance. The second group of people, though, are those who wish to prepare for a career in one of these 2 tracks, but they have a background in something completely different. So it's people who maybe have been, I'll give a very solid example. We had a student who was an attorney and who had been working in law, or who is working in law, and who decided that law was not something they wanted to pursue any longer, and they wanted to really shift over into psychology. But to make that narrative make sense to a future employer, they're going to say, so you have a law degree, but you want to come work for us in the area of IO psychology. That there's no employer, or very few employers, that are going to be willing to make that leap. One, the person doesn't have the skill set, right, and the background to do that, but they also don't have any kind of degree or knowledge base on which to draw. So for people that are trying to make a shift, getting this degree arms them both with the gap filler, right, for that narrative to a potential employer, and the educational background and skill set that they need to succeed in that new job. So people in that area, we find them here as well. And then the third group are students who wish to pursue a PhD or a PsyD or some kind of advanced degree in one of these 2 areas, or something very closely related. And they need a stepping stone. PhD programs and PsyD programs are notoriously difficult to get into. Some take as few as 2 or 3 students. Some take, 6 or 7. Some in very larger cohorts might take 20 or so. But it really is a very competitive market. And in order to make yourself someone who stands out to a potential doctoral program, it helps to have a master's degree, because you're demonstrating that you can already do graduate level work, that you have a passion for the field. You become a much safer gamble than someone who maybe just has a bachelor's degree. So in terms of our curriculum, we are a 36 credit program. All of our courses are 3 credits each. So it's 12 courses that make up this program. And we have 3 core courses. I'll go through these courses a little bit more in detail in just a sec. So these are the buckets that they fall in. So you take 3 courses in the core course section. You'll take 2 courses that are considered research courses, 2 capstone courses, 3 specialization courses, and 2 electives. So I'll go over each of these categories right now. So again, 3 in core, 2 in research, 2 in capstone, 3 in specialization, and 2 in electives. So here are the core courses. So you notice there are 5 of them, and you choose 3. And we do this because these are foundational courses. So we want students to really think about, you know, if they're going into IO psychology and they really want to go into, I don't know, personnel assessment, they may want to take the learning and cognition class, the theories of personality class, and the social behavior class. Or if they're going into something like developmental psychology and they're particularly interested in, you know, working with geriatric patients and looking at their wellness and well-being, maybe they want to take biological foundations of behavior, psychopathology, and a social behavior, or something of that sort. So you can put together different combinations of those courses that make the most sense for what it is that you're interested in and what you're hoping to do in the future. So after students take those courses, they move into their research and capstone courses. There are 2 courses that people need to take to make up those research courses: advanced research methods and statistics. And notice there's a little line between them. That's not just a handy line to break them apart. There are some classes that go in between there. The reason why I want to talk about these side by side is this is where students are getting all of their research, and it's particularly these skills that feed off of or build off of one another and feed off of one another. So the capstone courses are the courses that students take at the very end, and they really sort of call back to these earlier courses, these research methods courses, and draw on those skills so that students can build a capstone project in the first semester of these capstone courses. And then the second semester is actually executing that project. This is really our version of a thesis. So that happens at the end. So these really tie very closely together. Then we have what are called our specialization courses. And let me just divert for just a second, because I see that there's a question from one of our attendees who asked, is there any way we can get these slides? Absolutely. Just so all of you know, before you're trying to vigorously scribble these out, I probably should have mentioned this at the beginning. We will send these slides to everyone that signed up and attended today. And you'll also get a video about how to apply to the program and some tips about applying. So just a quick side note, and thanks for asking that question. All right, and someone also mentioned, yes, you can screenshot them as well. So maybe I dated myself there, but yes, you can screenshot them if you'd like. You can even take a little picture with them with your phone if you would like as well. But we are going to send you the slide deck, so you'll have them. Okay, so the specialization courses are courses that students also will take. There's 3 of them. These typically are what comes between the research methodology courses that I just showed you and on the left-hand side of the screen, and the capstone courses that are on the right-hand side of the screen. So if someone is pursuing industrial organizational psychology, the top 3 courses are the ones that make the most sense to them. And for the developmental psychologists, those bottom three are the ones that make the most sense to them. One of the things that you'll notice is, unlike some programs, we have a really tight group of courses for students to take. There are not this huge wide group of bucket of electives where students just kind of pick and you know, pull from wherever. We have a really tight group, and that's because we really want to make sure that students walk away with a very specific set of skills that they're going to need to be successful in their area. So we want to make sure that people aren't just putting together some random pool of skill sets from different courses. You know, take IO Psych, Intro to IO Psych. We want you to then look into organizational development and effectiveness, then proceed to performance management and motivation. Likewise, if you are in the developmental psychology track, you want to look at perspectives on developmental psychology, then focus on the first half of life, right? Childhood, adolescence, the second half, adulthood, and then there's an aging component later in the electives. So we want to just make sure we're covering all of the bases, and because of that, we structure these very tightly. So if you look at the elective courses, you'll see, just, again, very tight groups of electives. So you take 2 courses, there's your 2 on the top. If you're industrial organizational psychology, you're going to take personnel selection and group dynamics. On the bottom, for developmental psychology, cognitive development, and atypical development. So I do want to say, though, that there have been students who have said, you know, Professor Marquez-Lewis, I really think that even as an IO psychology student, that it makes a lot of sense in light of what I'm currently doing in my profession, and I plan on staying at this, you know, job and with this company for a long time, that it would make a lot more sense to me, for me, if I took a personnel selection course and a atypical development course, for example. So we would talk about that, you know, think about that. If that makes sense, then that is possible. So while I say that it's a pretty tight group, that doesn't mean that there aren't occasionally instances where we can swap some of the electives. So in terms of after the master's degree, a lot of people, rightly so, are asking what kinds of career opportunities are there available for me with a master's degree in psychology? And really, the best way to do this is to think about wherever you are, go to Indeed or Monster, type in that location. If you live in Las Vegas, or if you live in California, or even if you live here in New York, punch that into the location, and then use the words master's in psychology, or you can get even more specific, master's in developmental psychology, master's in industrial organizational psychology. And what you're going to see are all of the types of jobs for which that is a qualification, because it's easy to look at a master's in psychology and say, well, traditionally people fall into these categories, and we can give you big themes, and I have here on this slide, but there are all kinds of different jobs that are seeking out people with a master's in psychology. And you know, you might look in those, you know, um, those search engines, and what you'll find is, wow, you may not have ever thought about XYZ. And I can give you an example. So a lot of students don't think about market research as being something that psychologists do. And yet a lot of market research firms, a lot of advertising agencies look for psychologists, and they have psychologists on staff because everything about marketing is about human behavior and persuasion and understanding how, you know, different things work. Now, you might say, well, what does that have to do with developmental psychology, or what does that have to do with IO psychology? Well, it really depends on what it is you're marketing, right? So there are a lot of the skill sets that you take from psychology, not only an understanding of human behavior, but all of the research components that you'll learn through your stats class, through your research methodology class, through your capstone course, which is really a research projects that are directly applicable to marketing and market research. Understanding how people develop over time, again, depending on the product and what it is you're looking at. These have direct application to that field. The most natural fit, though, of course, would be the human and social services. So hospitals and school settings, right? Here are some actual positions that I pulled. An operations manager for the Division of Early Childhood Education and Charter Schools, a community integration counselor, a child development specialist, For the IO track, it shouldn't come as any surprise. Personnel and training is a huge theme for that group. They find themselves often working in human resources, being employment or talent acquisition specialists, working for organizations as an organizational effectiveness facilitator, a director of organizational development. So anytime a company buys out another company, there's a lot of restructuring. IO psychologists help with those things. So there's a lot of places that psychologists can find themselves that don't seem like the typical things that you'd think of when you think of psychology. And then research and data analysis. So again, with that nice background in research methodology, you can go into a company and work for people analytics. This actually was JetBlue, who was looking for someone in IO psychology to work in people analytics. So looking at their people and studying them constantly to think about how they can become a better company and offer more for their employees so that their employees don't leave, they're more productive, they're more happy, less stressed. A senior research analyst, someone who develops workforce surveys and analytics, a manager of what they call worker insights, evaluators, reviewers. So anything related to research, psychologists are well equipped to handle. So some of the frequently asked questions, I'll just go over some of them, and then again, I'm happy to open it up to you to hear what your questions are, to answer some that have already come in. Some of the questions that I get a lot, can I transfer credits to the new degree program? So to come into our program, yes, you can transfer credits, but if you've taken courses as part of another graduate program before, they have to be direct equivalents to our courses. So for example, if you've taken a statistics course from another graduate program, we would, as part of your onboarding, once you are admitted into the course, we would do a evaluation of the syllabus that you submit from that particular course that you took and our course, and make sure that the learning objectives match up, the topics match up, and if they do, yes, you could get credit for that. So we are able to take up to 2 classes. We're happy to do that, again, as long as they match our courses. How long will it take to get my degree? It's really up to you. How many courses that you like to take each semester? Do you like to take courses in the summer, which are obviously going to speed things up? I'm really excited to mention that for the first time, CUNY SPS will be running multiple summer sessions this summer of 18. So students have a couple of opportunities. Traditionally, we've only run one session, which was a 7-week summer session. We'll be running a few different sessions of differing lengths this upcoming summer. So that means that students have multiple opportunities to speed up the process a little bit. So our first group of students who are coming through, most of them took 3 classes and no summers, and it took them 5 semesters. So again, it's just, it's just math. 12 classes, however many you take per semester, will determine how long it takes to get the degree. How does online learning work? So I'm going to come back to that in just a second. I want to cover a couple of the other ones. So is the program really online? It absolutely is. It's fully online. You never have to step foot physically on this campus if you don't want to. However, we do have events, live events, talks, we have a series called A Day in the Life where we bring in different psychologists so that students understand all of these different opportunities that psychologists have and what they do, and what their paths have been to that profession, what it's like to be a day in the life of whoever that happens to be. And if you want to come on campus to meet those people, to network, to attend in person, you're welcome to do that. We also broadcast those over the web as well. So you can also sit home in your pajamas, sit at work on a break and watch them as well. You can even send in your questions just like you are tonight. So other than that though, yes, program's totally online. You never have to come here. We do encourage you to come graduation though, but again, you don't even have to come to that. Are there scholarships? Yes, there are. We have scholarships available for graduate students. You can go to our scholarship page and you can read a little bit more about the ones that are targeted toward grad students, because there aren't always scholarships available for them. You know, as many of you know, funding graduate education is really difficult because students are no longer eligible for Pell Grants or federal grants, so they are eligible for federal loans, but scholarships are a nice way to get some money that you don't have to pay back. So take a look at the scholarship page, look at the criteria for each of the scholarships, and determine which of those that you're eligible for and able to apply for. Will the program prepare me for licensure? So if you look on our website, you probably notice that it says, you know, this is not a program that will prepare people for licensure. The reason why is licensure is only required in psychology for counseling and clinical psychology programs. So mental health counseling, counseling itself, clinical psych, anything where there's going to be therapy. So that's when psychology requires licensure. Every other area of psychology does not require licensure. So social psychologists, sports psychology, IO psychology, developmental psychology, and the list goes on and on. Licensure is not a part of those fields. So because we don't have a clinical psychology program and we don't have a mental health counseling program, we have nothing to do with licensure because they're not required for our areas. If you are interested in therapy, I would say, if you want to use the developmental psychology track as a stepping stone to a PhD program or a PsyD program, yes, that makes a lot of sense because you'll get the preparation for licensure as part of that program. But if you want to complete this program and then sit for licensure, it's not going to happen. None of our courses are about therapy because that's not what we focus on here. I'd be happy to share with you some really great programs in CUNY. Counseling, we have lots of them at different campuses. Unfortunately, none of them are online, but we do have some really great programs at CUNY. So back to the question of how does online learning work? So online learning is often misunderstood. So people usually think of the old correspondence model. So there's some work, I work through it in these modules, I turn in the work, the professor grades the work, and then I go on to the next part, and et cetera, et cetera. That was the old model. And the downside to that was students were kind of teaching themselves, and they were feeling very isolated. So they didn't feel part of a learning community. They were just kind of doing work on their own. Online learning has evolved quite a bit, and it really does feel, and many students will tell you that it feels like you're in a classroom, but you're not in a classroom. So you're part of a virtual community. You are interacting and engaging with both your professor and your fellow classmates routinely, because the course has a course site. It sits in something called Blackboard. So students log into Blackboard and then their courses are listed. They click on that course, it goes into their course site. And the course sites are organized with a menu tab all along the left-hand side, and they can click on that and go to different places. So they can go to the discussion board and the discussion for that week, and they post and they answer and talk to each other. Sometimes some professors use something called VoiceThread, where it actually records your voice and your comment, and then other students play it, listen, then respond. Others use text, you know, and I don't mean text messaging, I mean actual text. So typing and sending the discussions that way, just like an online forum would work. But everybody's talking about the same topic that the professor wants them to be talking about that week. So the professor will post the question, then the whole class is engaged in this conversation. Now, it may be that you log in on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you know another classmate logs in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So the conversation may not be happening in exactly real time, but it's taking place in the same week. So there is back and forth. Everybody's, you know, leaving their comment, then coming back and circling back and giving the other person's comment and responding to someone else. The professor's in the conversation asking questions. So it's very engaging. There's also assignments that are due every single week. Right? Well, I shouldn't say every week. Not every course has a weekly assignment, but there all in accordance with the syllabus that you get at the beginning of the semester, just like every other CUNY campus or every other school. And everybody works through. You're doing the readings just like you would in a real class. You just physically don't have to be there. So other frequently asked questions: can I apply to this program if I wasn't a psychology major? The answer is yes. We have had many students who have applied to this program who are non-psych majors. I mentioned the attorney that we have in the program, but we have people from political science, philosophy, sociology, a lot of business students. You name it, we probably have someone with that background. Theater, there's, I think we have one nurse or former nurse. Yes, and the thing to mention about psychology is, as you know, psychology is the study of human behavior. So all of those different backgrounds and the things that you bring with you have probably something to do with human behavior. So we like to sort of bring all of these perspectives in the classroom, and I think it makes for stronger courses. If you're not a psychology major, though, are you going to be at a little bit of a deficit because you're going to be in the same courses with students who have been studying psychology as undergraduates for quite a long time? We've narrowed down the scope of a psychology degree to 3 core courses that we have to have students complete. So Introduction to Psychology is one of them, Statistics and Research Methods, and these are undergraduate courses, okay? So what if you don't have those? So you were a psychology major, you didn't take Intro to Psych as part of your general education as your major, what do you do? Well, I would recommend taking the Intro to Psychology course in the wintertime. So this winter, that starts right after the new year, and it's for 3 weeks. It's during January, in between the semesters. So we end this semester in the 3rd week in December, and we start again at the very end of January. And in between that, during January, is a 3-week winter session, and we always offer Introduction to Psychology. The reason I say that is because if someone wants to start in the spring, they have to have that course done. Most students, even if they weren't psychology majors, will still have had Introduction to Psychology because it's usually offered as part of a general education requirement. So they'll still have it. But if they don't have it, you don't want to have to spend the whole spring taking that course and then not be able to start the program until the summer or the fall. So if you take that over the winter session, it's a nice way to just quickly get it out of the way and then start the program in the spring. The other courses that students have to have are Statistics and Research Methods, and we're a little bit more flexible with those. We allow students to start the program with those prerequisites not met, but they have to meet the prerequisite in either the first semester or the second semester if they need both. So what I mean by that is, if you need both Statistics and Research Methods, you have to take one at least each semester. So you would have to take Statistics in the spring if you come in the spring semester, and you would have to take Research Methods the next term that you register for. So if you don't take summer class, that you have to register for Research Methods in the fall. If you want to take a summer school class, that has to be the class you take. Now you're limited to the courses and the number of courses that you can take in the master's group. You can only take courses from the core course options, which are those first basic courses I mentioned earlier, until you complete all of your prerequisites. So you can't go very far in the program without having these completed. What I often suggest to most students is take Stats and Research Methods in the same semester. Just get it over with the first semester, be done with it, and then move forward. You can take Stats and Research Methods and 1 master's course or 2 master's courses. But you probably don't want to spread them out if you can avoid it. But nevertheless, intro has to be done no matter what. Stats and Research Methods we can work with you on. In terms of admissions, you need a bachelor's degree from an accredited institution. So once again, you see accredited sort of pops up there. We need a personal statement telling us why you want to pursue this degree. what it is you're hoping to do with it and what's sort of bringing you to our program. You submit either your curriculum vitae, which is really your academic resume, or a basic resume. We need 2 letters of recommendation, and I cannot stress this enough. This will hold students' applications up, and in some cases, students miss deadlines because their letters of recommendation are not professional in nature or academic. Those are the only letters we take. So it needs to be a boss or a supervisor or manager or a former professor. Those are the letters that we want. No letters from friends, no letters from family, no letters from, a lateral colleague, meaning just someone you work with, Susie Q. We want Susie Q to be your manager, someone who can speak to your ability, the quality of work that you do, etc. And then we need transcripts indicating a GPA of 3.0. If you have lower than a GPA of 3.0, you should address this in your personal statement. We have taken students who have a GPA of less than 3.0, a 2.8, a 2.7, assuming everything else is strong. So you want to make sure that if you have a deficit in terms of your GPA, your statement should be strong. You want to have a really nice, tight resume. You want to have very strong letters of recommendation. And I should also mention, we need transcripts from every school you've ever attended and received credit for, even that one, class that you took during the summer at a community college, when you were home on break or something like that. A lot of times, prospective students think, and rightly so, I do understand why they think this. They think that all of their grades from past campuses are included in the transcript of the most recent school they attended. And that's just not the case. Actually, there are huge gaps in transcripts. So all it will say is transferred in, transferred in, transferred in. But we have no grades for that until we get the actual school's records. So we need transcripts from everywhere. And just a little FYI, sometimes students think, well, I'll just turn in the last one. And they won't know I attended other colleges. It always is noted in there where you've come from and any records that are associated. So, all of these things I've seen too many times, and they end up, causing stress for the student, because then the student realizes they still need their application isn't complete, etc. So just to avoid all those things, I just want to put that out there. All right. If you want to apply to the master's program, the link is located on our program page. You can also see it there on your screen. The deadline is December 1st, and the application has to be completed in its entirety, which means we need all pieces of it, all transcripts, the letters of recommendation, your statement, CV, the application itself filled out, and the application fee paid as well. So it's $125, and that all needs to be done by December 1st. And I should also mention that our first round of reviews for applications that have already been submitted is the first week in October. So if you've already applied to the program, or you plan on applying, and you really are one of those people that wants to know immediately whether you're in, I would say apply as early as possible, because for the people who have already applied, they're going to know in October. People who apply very close to the December 1st deadline, you can imagine how inundated we get with applications at that point. And so it takes a little bit longer. Sometimes that lag time is about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks before we get decisions made when it's toward the end. Starting in October, decisions will be made every 2 weeks. So there won't be much of a lag time there. So let me just say one last thing, and then I'll start taking your questions. Here's the contact information. I'm going to leave this up for the rest of the session. My information is at the top. Again, Dr. Carla Marquez-Lewis. I'm the director. That is my email address and my office number. I'm in the office quite frequently. I'm here now. So feel free to send me an email if you have questions. Pick up the phone if you want to talk. If I answer the phone, that means I'm free. If I don't, leave a message. I always return phone calls as quickly as possible, usually, same day, if not the next days. On the bottom is the contact information for Ayanna Peoples. She is our assistant director, her email address and her phone number. Likewise, feel free to reach out to her. She can answer your questions as well. So let me go ahead and see what kinds of questions you have here. Give me just 1 second.
See that little box in the corner there next to chat,
Okay.
next to questions? There you go.
So question, what is the difference between an MA, an MS, and an MBA in IO psychology? I don't know of an MBA in IO psychology. An MBA is a master's in business administration. So maybe you just meant an MBA versus an MA and an MS in IO psych. So generally, it depends on the campus, the differences between an MA and MS. But the general rule of thumb is an MS is more heavily focused on research. Because one is a Master of Arts, the other is a Master of Science. And an MBA is a business degree, Master's in Business Administration. So that's going to focus on business, and the IO psychology is going to focus on human behavior within not just business environments, but organizations at large, and just any place of work. Can you join a PhD program in psychology after an online MA psychology degree at CUNY? Sure. I mean, you have to apply to a PhD program, and it depends on the PhD program. I think maybe the question is having an online MA degree going to put you at any disadvantage? Your degree doesn't say online, so it's a master's in psychology from CUNY, just like anyone who took a face-to-face master's program at John Jay, at Brooklyn College, even here are face-to-face programs. There's no indication that something was online or face-to-face because we go through the same accrediting bodies as all programs in psychology, so they are equivalent, and there's no distinction made between online and in person because the format doesn't matter, the content, the learning objectives, etc., are the things that we focus on in psychology. So there would be no reason, I guess, is my point, to indicate that it's online. In terms of what the perspective is on from outsiders on online education, it really depends. Some people still think online education isn't as rigorous, and those are people who don't understand online education, because most people agree that online learning actually is much more rigorous. It takes more time, more dedication, etc. But I would suggest looking at the PhD program to which you want to apply and look at their qualifications and what it is that they're looking for in their students that will be joining, and get a sense of what it is they're looking for. But our students have gotten into all sorts of different schools, PhD programs, masters in social work, MBA programs, so they haven't seemed to have been met with any kind of resistance. What is the job prospect after getting an MA in IO psychology? I think we covered that. If there are more specific questions, feel free to send them over. I have a bachelor's in music, but I want to go to psychology to do my MA. Will I have to take psychology courses before applying? So I hope what I had mentioned at the end of the session answered that. If not, feel free to send any more specific questions. How is the class schedule? Are there mandatory webinars? So the classes generally run on a particular day cycle. So for example, I'll give you an example of one of my classes. We run on a Monday to Sunday schedule. That means the week starts on Monday and it ends on Sunday. Then the next day we start the next week. And then it goes through Sunday, and so on and so forth. So yes, there are readings that have to be done in that week, videos that have to be watched. Maybe there are some slides that students have to go through, a discussion board post based on a prompt that I post that they have to respond to. But all of that is outlined in the beginning in the syllabus that students get so that they can chart out their time appropriately. But so I guess my answer to that would be yes, there are mandatory webinars or resources that students have to look at, but you don't have to look at them at any particular time during the week. Our courses are what we call asynchronous, meaning they don't take place in real time. So you don't have to, everybody doesn't have to be online at the same time. If 2 o'clock in the morning is the best time for you to work, that's fine. Someone else, it might be 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Another person, 4 o'clock in the morning on Mondays and Wednesdays. You know, you just have to be online and checking in at least 3 times a week, logging into the site and seeing what's going on. Let's see. I saw the prerequisites. If you're missing the prerequisites, I think I mentioned those and answered that. Is the program available to international students? Yes. We have students from all over the United States and several countries outside the United States who attend our programs. I would encourage you to go to the graduate admissions program the admissions page. There's a graduate admissions section and a undergraduate admissions section. There's also some information about international students. One of the things that you would have to do is it'll talk to you about getting translated transcripts if that's needed. It depends on the school that you attended internationally, and it'll give you some more information about that. So feel free to take a look at that. If you have any questions, you can reach out to the admissions office or you can reach out to me. Does the program provide assistance with the search for internships or job opportunities? We do not. We're like all the other CUNY campuses. We don't offer job placement or anything like that. We do have a career services office that can work with students about internships. We do encourage students to look for research opportunities. And we can assist with that, but job placement afterward, no, that's not something CUNY SPS does. All right, are these offered online at CUNY SPS? I'm not sure to what that is referring. Feel free to send some follow-up to what that question meant. The question was, are these offered online at CUNY SPS? I'm not sure what these are, so feel free to send that to me and I'm happy to answer it. For admission, what is primarily looked at and which is the heavier weight on the decision? I would say that we look at students as a collective. So we look at the statement. We of course look at the transcripts. We look at the letters of recommendation. We really look at everything. I wouldn't say anything is weighted, you know, any heavier than the transcript. Your grade point average is a pretty good indication of a pattern of how you work in an academic setting, but it's not everything. So that's why I've said that we have taken students who have a 2.7 who had an excellent vision for where they're going, and their statement was very strong and their letters of recommendation were really positive, and they had some really good explanations for why they didn't do so great. So one of the students that I'm thinking of, you know, actually more than one, you know, had these transcripts when they were 18, 19, 20 years old, and now it's 10, 15 years later, and they want to pursue a graduate degree, and they say, you know, that's not me anymore. I wasn't a very serious student. I've had a lot of time in the workforce. I'm much more serious now, and, you know, I'm ready to go. And we have other people who are willing to vouch for them and say, yes, this person does excellent work. They're wonderful. They deserve a chance. And we have accepted them in the program and they've excelled. So, you know, transcript is of course the heaviest, but like I said, it's not everything. Letters of recommendation weigh pretty heavily, and that statement needs to be very powerful and can be, you know, can really help an application that otherwise is maybe not as strong in other areas. So someone asked, what if I'm self-employed? I'm going to assume this is probably in reference to the letters of recommendation. You'd have to find letters from someone else, organizations to which you apply or to which you belong, people who oversee your work in some capacity. If you don't have anybody, there's not much I can say. You would have to have some kind of person that could vouch for you that's not related to you, that is not you know, an employee of yours or someone that's a friend. We need something that's objective. So I would reach out to former employers or former professors. How does credit or no credit factor into the admissions? It really depends on the school. So some schools, maybe it's Sarah Lawrence or something like that. You have a pass, no pass. It really depends on the school. So I'm not sure if, I'm assuming that's what you mean is in terms of GPA. It depends on the school. If we don't have anything other than credit or no credit, then it's kind of highly unusual, because even in the case of something like Sarah Lawrence, where you don't have a grading system in a traditional sense, what you do have are final reports that are submitted that are actually quite detailed about a student's record and how they did in that class and what their performance was like. And those are very valuable, and we will read them. In some ways they're a little more valuable even than a grade, because they're very thorough. So I have yet to come across an instance where a school only gave credit or no credit. So maybe provide a little more information and I can help answer that a little bit better. What do you recommend for a person out of school 10 plus years as a stay-at-home mom as far as letters of recommendations go? Do these need to be recent? Well, they need to be recent letters. Whether or not the relationship is recent is no. And for exactly that reason. So we have had students who've reached out to past professors and said, you know, I have been out of school for 10 years, but maybe you remember me, I took your class, I got an A, you know, here's the project I worked on, et cetera, et cetera. You'd be surprised how much professors remember. I remember students from 10 years ago. I remember students from 15 years ago. It just oftentimes requires a little bit of jogging of the memory. So past employers who can speak to your work and who you are. But it does not have to be, you know, right now, specifically for the reasons you're outlining. How many credits and classes should I take if I'm a full-time student? So in terms of something like financial aid or loans, the purposes of loans, you have to take 6 credits or 2 classes to be considered full-time in graduate school. So I hope that answers your question. In terms of how much someone can handle, only you know what you can handle. The rule of thumb that we give for undergraduates is 9 to 12 hours per week per class. So obviously for graduate students, it's going to be more, you know, 12 to 15 hours, kind of just a rule of thumb. Again, it doesn't mean it takes every student 12 to 15 hours per course per week, but I think it's a good amount of time to set aside for coursework that counts your readings, your assignments, your posts, etc. So like I said, you know, online learning is not for the weary. It does take a lot of work. And so if you're working 40 hours a week and you want to take 4 classes, can you really handle 48 to 60 hours of coursework per week? Because that's really what 12 to 15 hours per course per week would amount to. And when you look at it and think about it that way, most of our students say, I better just take 2. And they do really well doing that. If I wanted to obtain a PhD in clinical psychology, would it be helpful if I obtained a MA in developmental psychology? Yes. Regarding the attendance of other colleges, what if you received credit for courses taken while still in high school from College Now or a course accredited by another university, all of which are on the transcript? There should be no problems with that. And we have had that in the past. A lot of high school students will take intro to psychology. So if the college waives it or gives you transfer credit for it, we'll honor that. I ultimately want to get a PsyD in school and child clinical psychology. Would me be going to this program without the optional licensure make sense? As a stepping stone to one of those PhD or PsyD programs, yes, because unless you're a stellar bachelor student with extensive research experience, it's very hard to compete with people who are vying for those very limited slots. Like I said, there are some clinical psychology programs that take 3 students a year. You can imagine how much of a standout you have to be able to get into these programs. So a lot of people pursue a master's degree as a way to get a leg up. How much does the program cost? So there are two different ways to think about it. One is if you're attending full-time, there's a full-time cost, and then the other is per credit. So per credit is $425 per credit, and there's 3 credits per class, so it's about $1,200 per class. There are 12 classes. So in the end, it ends up costing around $15,000, which, as I mentioned before, is ridiculously reasonable because CUNY is very well known for their low tuition costs, and it's based on the group that we market to, which is, you know, well, we market ourselves for being a very affordable institution to attend. If I get a master's in IO, will I be able to work with kids? It'd probably be better to work on a developmental psychology degree if you particularly want to work with children, because that focuses more on children. IO psychology, because it's related to how human behavior works in organizations or in a workplace, most kids are not in workplaces or organizations, so it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. IO psychologists generally work with adults because adults are the population of people in organizations and in workplaces. So developmental would be the better track. If I go into this degree, would I still need to get the GRE to continue to get a PsyD? Most PsyD programs and PhD programs, yes, require the GRE. We do not. Is there admission to start study in fall of 18? Yes, but we don't start collecting applications for that program until after, or that semester, until after the deadline closes for the spring term. So after December 1st, we'll start collecting applications or opening up the portal for applications for the fall. Any plans for SPS to start a PhD or PsyD program in the future? No, not right now. We don't have any PhD programs at all across all of SPS, and because of the concentrated amount of hours that it takes to focus on a PhD program, we have no plans to do that. Classes are offered in the winter, yes. Transcripts, yes, send transcripts even if you're within the CUNY network. It depends. Depending on the year that you attended, you may want to contact the admissions office to see if they can pull some of your CUNY transcripts. The capstone project, how it's different than a thesis. I think that's a question probably beyond the scope of this because we're already over time, but I'm happy to explain the capstone project, or you can read about it if you go to our curriculum page on our master's site. You can read a description of the capstone project. Yes, in terms of textbooks, someone asked about textbooks or materials provided. Depends on the class, like any class, textbooks, or sometimes there are readings that are provided. It really depends on the class. Are you performing actual research or just creating proposals? The proposal is just the first part of it, and then there's the actual project. It's a 2-semester capstone project. Someone asked, the transcript of the last school I attended shows every college I attended, the dates. It's part of my official and unofficial. Would I be able to send this? No, it has to be every transcript, and that's just a mandatory part of our application process. How many hours of study? That really just depends on every student. Again, the 12 to 15 hours should encapsulate everything, but it varies. Someone asked about a GRE requirement. There is no GRE requirement. If one of the grades is a C and not a B for your prerequisite, we can talk about that. So just reach out about it. Someone asked what kinds of studying resources the school offers for research, books and magazines, etc. I'm not sure what that question means. Studying resources. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what that means, but feel free to send me an email with the specifics, and I'm happy to answer it. Does the length of time between the time you took the prerequisite and when you start the master's program matter? It does not. How can we obtain a syllabus so we can compare the course, such as statistics and research methods? We do not release syllabi to students. It's an unfair advantage ahead of the semester, but as part of the onboarding process, you have to fill out a form. It's called a transfer credit form, and then you submit the syllabus. We do the comparison of the statistics and research or whatever the courses happen to be, and then we determine whether or not it meets it, and then we let you know. What's the ratio of students that get into the program? It really depends. I wouldn't say that we have a good solid number because we're only 4 semesters in, but right now it's roughly 50%, maybe a little more than 50%. If my GPA is not affected by making a credit or no credit class for my undergraduate, but I received no credit, how will the admissions look at it even though it did not harm my GPA? I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're asking. Maybe send me an email or give me a call and I can give you some more specific information. Does IO have biology of behavior as a course, or is this a course offered only in developmental? It's a core course, so it's offered to everyone. All right, I think I've answered everything. If there is a specific question that you did not get answered, I have to shut down the webinar only because, you know, I want to honor everyone's time, but feel free to send me the question via email. My information is right on the screen in front of you, and I'm happy to answer any of those questions. But otherwise, I hope that you learned something about our program, and I, again, welcome you to reach out to me if you have any further questions. I wish you the best of luck, and I hope you have a very nice evening. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.